Okay, so picture this. It's early morning in New York City. The sun's barely up. Brian Thompson, he's the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, and he's walking into his company's big investor conference.
Yeah, one of those conferences where everyone's excited talking about the future, what's coming next.
Exactly. Except that future gets cut short. Gunshots. Thompson's fatally shot right there on the street.
It's it's a scenario you'd expect in a movie, but this actually happened.
It did, and it leaves us with a ton of questions. I mean, who would target a healthcare CEO like this? What's the motive? What were they trying to achieve?
Right, this is the kind of thing we're going to dive into today. We've got news reports, we've got reactions from people who knew Thompson, and we've a lot to unpack here.
Absolutely. So let's start with the facts. What do we actually know about what happened?
Well, if you look at the reports from CBS Minnesota and FOX9, the police are calling it a targeted attack. And they say it was calculated, premeditated.
Okay, so this wasn't random. This was planned. Do we know any details about how it went down?
Yeah, so it was 6:45 in the morning, right outside the Hilton Hotel on West 54th Street. The suspect was apparently waiting for Thompson and shot him multiple times.
Wow. And then what? Did they catch the person?
No, so that's the thing. They vanished, first on foot, and then, get this, they blended into the city on an e-bike.
An e-bike? That's crazy.
Right, it's wild. Makes you think about how easy it can be to just disappear in a big city.
It really does. And it's easy to forget that we're not just talking about some corporate executive here. This was a real person. Brian Thompson was 50 years old. He had a family.
Yeah, a wife and 2 kids.
It's just a terrible tragedy. And his career path is actually pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah. He spent something like 2 decades with UnitedHealthcare.
I read he started there back in 2004. Worked his way up from the bottom.
Which is even more interesting considering he started as a CPA.
Really? A CPA. You don't usually see that kind of background for the CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
It's not the usual path, that's for sure.
Speaking of Fortune 500, just to remind everyone how big UnitedHealthcare is, they're the largest health insurer in the U.S.
They cover over 49 million people, and I think they're ranked 5th on the Fortune 500 list.
And globally, they've got over 100,000 employees. So this wasn't just some small company CEO. This was someone with a lot of influence.
Definitely. When something like this happens, it's going to send ripples through the entire healthcare industry, the financial markets too, probably, and even into the communities where UnitedHealthcare works.
Right. It's a huge deal. And on top of all that, there are the personal reactions to this.
Oh, yeah.
His wife, Paulette, released a statement. It's really heartbreaking. You can tell she's just devastated. She described him as a loving, generous, talented man.
It really is.
And it's not just family. There's this outpouring of grief from people he worked with, even some politicians.
They're not just mourning a CEO.
Right. It's more than that. Like UnitedHealth Group called him a highly respected colleague and friend. Governor Walz from Minnesota, he called it horrifying news.
And Senator Klobuchar called it a shocking act of violence.
And Jeff Harmening, he's the CEO of General Mills, he even said something. Called Thompson a respected business leader, a beloved father, a good friend. You know, what really struck me was this statement from Thompson's high school in Iowa.
Oh, yeah, what they say.
They described him as a star student, athlete, homecoming king, and a respected leader.
It's even CEOs, they start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
They were once just kids full of potential.
It really puts things in perspective. We often forget that about people, especially when they reach such high positions.
Absolutely. And remember, all of this happened while Thompson was in New York for UnitedHealthcare's investor conference.
Wow, yeah. Imagine being at that conference all ready to hear about the company's future, and then this happens.
I read in the FOX9 report that they canceled the conference right away.
Makes sense.
Andrew Whitty, he's the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. He had to address everyone who was there. Apparently, he said they were dealing with a very serious medical situation at the time. It must have been just a surreal experience for everyone there, totally unsettling. It's a reminder that, life can change so quickly. 1 minute you're at a conference talking about the future, and then the next.
It's gone. And that brings us to the investigation. What do we know about how this happened?
Well, the NYPD, they've said this was planned. They called it a premeditated, targeted attack.
Which makes it even more concerning that the suspect just disappeared.
Right. Vanished into thin air, first on foot, and then they were on an e-bike. Just blended right into the city.
Like something out of a movie. You wouldn't think someone could just vanish in New York. I mean, isn't there surveillance everywhere?
You'd think so, but yeah, apparently not. I mean, it makes you wonder, right, about security, not just for CEOs, but for everyone.
Yeah, it's a scary thought.
Makes you wonder, are we all just too complacent these days?
It really does. So where does the investigation go from here? What are the next steps?
Well, the NYPD is offering a reward for information. They're hoping someone comes forward with something.
Hopefully that leads to an arrest.
Yeah. And they're working with law enforcement in Minnesota, too, where Thompson lived.
Trying to see if there are any connections there, I guess.
Exactly.
It sounds like they're really putting a lot of resources into this investigation.
Yeah. And hopefully they'll be able to figure out, like, who did this and why. Get some answers about the motive.
Because beyond just solving this crime, I think this case has some bigger implications, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Like, are we seeing more violence against corporate leaders? Are CEOs becoming targets?
That's a scary thought.
It really is. I mean, it's one thing to disagree with a company's policies or whatever.
Right.
But violence, that's never the answer.
Never.
And then you have to think about executive security. What are companies doing to protect their people, especially those in high-profile positions? I mean, clearly, what's in place now?
It's not enough. This happened in New York City.
Exactly. It makes you wonder what more can be done.
It's easy to get wrapped up in the headlines and the investigation and all of that. But we can't forget, there's a family grieving here.
100%. This was someone's husband, someone's father.
And yeah, UnitedHealth, they're this huge company.
But they're made up of people, individuals.
Yeah, right. And there are thousands of people who worked with Brian Thompson who are now dealing with this loss.
It's a ripple effect. You know, it goes way beyond just the immediate victims.
It really does. It reminds us that behind every corporation, behind every news story, there are real people whose lives are being impacted.
Exactly. As we learn more about this case, it's important to remember that, to approach it with empathy and understanding, and really a commitment to finding peaceful solutions to these kinds of challenges.
You know, it's easy to think about this case like, oh, it's about corporations, it's about big business. But this hits close to home for everybody, you know.
It does.
Hard not to feel kind of uneasy after something like this.
Yeah, it makes you think about, like, your own safety. Makes you feel a little less secure. I mean, it's a basic human need, right, to feel safe.
It is. And this kind of thing, you hear about it on the news, but it always feels so far away.
Right, like it happens to other people. And that's what's so unsettling about this. It shatters that illusion of safety that we all have.
Like anyone can be vulnerable. It doesn't matter who you are.
Exactly.
So where do we even go from here? Like, how do we deal with this? How do we process it?
I think the first thing is just acknowledging how you feel.
Okay.
It's okay to feel shocked, sad, even a little scared. Those are all normal reactions to something like this.
So don't bottle it up.
Exactly. Talking about it can really help.
With
anyone you trust. Friends, family, maybe even a therapist. You know, there are even online support groups. Connecting with people who get it, it helps you process everything.
It's like that saying, what is it? Shared joy is double joy, shared sorrow is half sorrow. Something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not just about feelings, right? This whole thing makes you think about, like, why is this happening? What are the root causes of this kind of violence?
Yeah.
And what can we do to make things better?
Those are the big questions, aren't they?
They are.
Maybe, and hopefully this can be a turning point, a chance for everyone to say, okay, enough is enough. We need to be better. We need to focus on, like, understanding each other, building connections, you know?
Instead of tearing each other down.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a lot today. This case, it's complicated. It's tragic.
It is.
We've talked about the shooting, the investigation, what it means for security, for society. But before we wrap up, there's one thing I keep thinking about. We've talked about the bad stuff, the violence, the fear. But what about hope?
Hope?
Yeah, like, can anything good come out of this? Can we learn from this and make things better?
I think we can. I really do. We have to believe that we can learn from this and make the world a safer place. A place where this kind of thing doesn't happen. It starts with us.
It does. Well, to everyone listening, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another look at something important. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.